Hi, my name is Megan. I am 19 years old. I am from Frisco, Texas, and this is my recovery story. So, when I turned 16, I got diagnosed officially with anorexia nervosa. And early on, I got diagnosed with OCD and depression and anxiety, which then led into that. And so, it was later down the road that we found out that diagnosis, though. I would say that it was like going on from sixth grade all the way to sophomore year. So kind of when COVID hit, I was all on my own until then. So that was 2020. So 2013 to like 2020, I was in silence on my own, like trying to figure out how to navigate this whole mindset I had all the time. And nobody knew, not even my parents. I was very quiet about it and I just wanted to deal with it on my own. And so it was really challenging and really isolating at the same time because I had no personality, because it took everything in me every single day to hide who I really was, because I was struggling so much. So I was a cheerleader, and cheerleading took everything out of me, but it was very body image focused. And I didn't ever struggle with my body. I didn't struggle with food until I turned 11. Like, that's when I started noticing these red flags. But as an 11-year-old, I had no idea. I was like, this is normal. Everybody goes on these fad diets. Everybody goes on everything that is on the internet and you follow it. And so as an 11-year-old, I was like, okay, I need to do this too. And so it was just normalized. I had no idea, and nobody I knew what eating disorders really were, because they were very not talked about. Like, nobody wanted to talk about them. Everybody was afraid of that word, eating disorders. And so no one really caught on. No one believed me when I said there was something going on in my mind that I was scared of and didn't understand. And so when I got diagnosed with depression and anxiety and OCD, my parents were like, okay, that's what it is. That's all it is. And then when it turned into something more and they started noticing red flags, that's when I think the real help started. But I wasn't willing to take that help at that point, because I was like, I've struggled this long, so I don't need to continue. I just need to continue struggling, because that's what I deserve. It kind of felt like walking on a tightrope and hoping that you're not going to fall or slip, because it was like every single morning I would wake up and put the same smile on my face that I did when I wasn't struggling with any thoughts or any negative mindsets. And I would just walk it and hope that I wouldn't slip and hope no one would catch on. And it makes you feel like you're living on your own little island, because you're like, okay, nobody's catching on. Nobody is understanding how I'm speaking and how harmful it is to myself and others. Because I know, as a person who loves other people so much and so deeply, how harmful it became when I didn't love the people the way I used to, and I didn't love myself at all. And so it was really hard. It was scary. There were moments where I was like, I can't do this anymore, because there's nothing to me. I have nothing to give to this world, because I'm so ingrained in my eating disorder and so stuck in the ways that it tells me to live. I've had two big eye-opening moments of when I was like, I need help. I need more than what is happening right now. So when I was it was spring break of my senior year, and I had a couple months left before I left for college. And finally I was with my therapist and my dietitian, and I was like, there has to be a change. There has to be something. And they agreed. Obviously they don't push until you have to push yourself too. So you have to meet them in the middle too. You have to be willing to put in the work and be willing to let go of something that has been your coping skill and has provided you comfort. And so I would say that time in my life was the very first time I wanted help. And so I was with them, and they basically said they're supporting me every step of the way, but I have to be the one to take the step. And so then I went into a PHP and IOP program. So I was in it the rest of my senior year, did school virtually, and finished all of the things and graduated. And I was convincing myself I was better. I was convincing everybody. I was very manipulative because I wanted college to still happen. And so I went through the treatment process, and I discharged and was like, I'm in recovery. This is the strongest I've ever been. But deep down, I knew it was my eating disorder still telling me no, you're not in recovery. You're in like quasi recovery basically. So I still was holding on to my eating disorder, but still like trying to do the things, if that makes sense. And then I left for college 2 days after I discharged from treatment the first time. And that was probably the best and worst decision I've ever made, because it was the first time I actually realized I was not okay fully, like not just half wise or like 25%, like I knew that there was something more. I was sitting in my dorm room with my roommate, and my therapist and I like had just had a session, and I told her like I didn't want to do this anymore. I didn't want to live like this. I didn't even know if I could keep breathing if I didn't get the help I needed. And I was very manipulative, because my eating disorder, like that's how eating disorders work. They're very manipulative. And so I convinced everyone I was doing just fine. And so this was very out of the blue when I called my parents and said like, hey, we need to do something more, or I don't know what the next year is going to hold, or next week, or whatever. And then that's when I really got the help I needed. I think it was a mix of everything. So the hardest part for me, I think, was learning how to make decisions for myself, and also knowing no one's patting me on the back for saying good job for eating that meal, or good job for choosing recovery today, good job for going to class. It was, okay, this is all in my hands and in my control. And growing up, I have very supportive parents, and I hadn't had the experience of being on my own like most kids do before going to college. And so when I got there, I was very scared, and immediately I canceled all appointments I had that were recovery focused. And I think that really caused the relapse that happened. I was in denial. I was in full denial until I noticed like I was eating maybe like one meal. And I was like, that's enough. Like, that's how I can survive a week, every week. And that's when I knew something had to change, because school was going great, which was the hardest part. Like, I was focused. I knew what I was doing. I was doing so good in classes. And then, but like mentally, I was slowly dying. So I met with my therapist virtually, because she was able to see me in Arkansas while she was in Texas. And she and I talked through things, and I told her like, I don't know where to go. I'd never been to a residential facility. I didn't even know what it was going to be like. And so she wanted me to take that control and find a place that she thinks that my healing could really happen. And so I looked up, I think, 20 different places, and nothing was catching my eye. Nothing was feeling like somewhere where I could really heal. And then I looked up just places in Texas, and Eating Disorder Solutions was the first I saw. And I don't know, there was something in me, like I was so afraid to make phone calls to every other facility, but this one I just like pressed it and called. And that same day I got like news that I could be admitted the next Monday. And I think that right there was like the sign for me from God, like, this is the place you need to be. This is the place that is going to provide you the first step in your healing journey, and the real step too. Even the admissions person was so like caring and supportive, and wasn't like, you know, your everyday admissions person for anywhere. Like, they cared, and that really touched me. I felt silenced for so long, and about anything relating to my eating disorder or my struggles, because that was partially my fault, because I hid for so long, and then it was like I came out of the blue. And so having that admissions person so welcoming and so open to getting me help right away, because I was very honest in the admissions thing, because I was like, I need help and I want it. And so knowing like they saw that, and then they took it to the clinical director at the time, and they got me in so quick, it was truly like the biggest blessing. I'll be honest, like when I was driving there, my parents took me, and I was emotionally exhausted. I was like, I can't do this, never mind. Like, let's turn around. Like, it's not right. Like, this isn't, I don't deserve it. And we got there, and my mom and dad were pretty emotional, as all parents probably would be if their kid was struggling. And I got there, and immediately the nurse that I was like first like interacted with was so welcoming, comforted my mom, and made me feel safe, like truly safe, in a place that I've never been. And I was obviously like waiting for what the next steps were for like admitting, and while the nurse was doing all the things, I met like one of the clients came out and was like, we're going to Build-A-Bear today. And I was like, oh, wait, really? And like for me, Build-A-Bear growing up was my happy place. Like I had like 50 Build-A-Bears. And so that right there was another sign. I was like, I didn't know that was a thing. Like I didn't know you could still have fun while healing, because so often you hear stories that healing is like the hardest and it's like the darkest moments. But like that was a light in my healing journey. And like just her talking and like being welcoming as another client going through her own healing, and she didn't know me, but she still was so willing to be welcoming. And I right then was like, I'm gonna be okay. It was like life-changing. I had always not been a vulnerable person, never willing to work through trauma, never willing to work through any of the negative things. I would go to therapy, basically waste time by saying all the things the therapist wants to hear. And Clarissa would not let me do that. She knew that she could see right through me and she could feel what I felt. And her coming to my level where I was, meeting me where I was, made me feel like, okay, I'm safe enough to say any and everything I need to. And because like she said that she can only take me as far as she's gone, but she's willing to never let me walk alone. And I have never heard that from anybody. And yeah, it was hard, but it was beautiful at the same time. And I struggled a lot with SI, and especially when I was there. And for the first time, I was like open and comfortable enough to talk about it. And she never judged me. She never left my side, because I have a really big fear of people leaving my life when they come into it, and especially when I share personal stuff. And she never did, and she walked me through every step of the way until I left. So it was beautiful, yeah. I definitely would say when I first got there to around middle like of November, I didn't think it was possible. Like I was like, I'm wasting space. I'm taking up other people's healing time. I'm not healing. I'm not doing anything, because in the time I thought healing had to be quick and easy. And now I see that it takes as ever long as it takes, and it isn't going to be easy. It's going to have its highs and it's going to have its lows, but it's like, what do I choose to do with it? And I think my biggest aha moment was when I was sitting outside and I had journaled a letter to basically my eating disorder, but also to my inner child. And they were two separate letters, and I wrote them, and I was very real, very vulnerable, shared every thought that I had about my eating disorder and the ways it did serve me in positive ways in the time, but also the very harmful things it did. And I never expected myself to share it. I never expected myself to open up about it with anybody, even a therapist. But all of a sudden, like I had this wave of confidence that hit me, and I was like sitting out by like the fire pit, and like everybody came over because we were doing something related for Christmas, and we were all sitting out there, and every client was out there, therapists were out there. I read it. All of a sudden, I read that letter that I was never going to read to anybody. And I think that was the first step into the real healing, because it was out there. And my story, just a piece of it, wasn't hidden anymore. And now it's made me realize like that was the puzzle piece that was always holding on, but like still falling off at the same time, and now it's held on for sure. It was really special knowing Clarissa was out there, because if I could give anybody my whole life, it would be her. And like I said, I have a very great relationship with my parents, but I've never trusted someone as much as I've trusted her. And I think that's a great thing, because you can then do real healing. And she always gave me a different sign of confidence, not like your generic confidence that everyone gives you, like, oh, you did so good, or oh, I'm so proud. Like, she was straightforward, which is what I needed, and then she was very loving at the same time. And having her out there and me reading it, it was like that was God's way of telling me like, okay, you're now like, you're not the caterpillar of the butterfly journey anymore. You're like choosing to fly. And that was huge. When I was in PHP the first time, like I didn't talk. I was silent. I sat in the corner doing my own thing. Half the time I was coloring, I wasn't even listening. And I think obviously that played a big effect into the future. And then it led me back to where I was, and that was back in treatment with groups, with other clients, with other people. It sucked at first. I was like, I'm not doing this. Like, I think my first day we had process group, and I sat there and I was like, y'all think I'm gonna talk? Like, no, like I am not telling anybody anything, because I have gone since I was 11 years old without saying any of this. And then people here are like so comfortable and so confident, and like that inspired me. But at the same time, I was still very closed-minded. I was like, not me, can't be me. Y'all are never hearing me talk. And I think it was the first like couple weeks before I started talking. Like I would talk, I think a little bit in my one-on-one session, but it took a while for me to like put down that mask. And I'm very happy I did, but it's hard. It's terrifying. And then like when you do take down that mask and you see the impact it makes on other people and how it helps other people, that's when I was like, okay, this isn't only helping me, it's also helping other people. I no longer felt alone. I felt like I had people who understood, but I also had people who were in different stages of recovery. And it made me believe that I could go through all stages and get to the point of like full recovery, of like choosing recovery every day, not choosing it one day and then struggling the next. Like I saw people literally from day one to discharge, and the difference of stages was beautiful. It's literally like a caterpillar going to a butterfly. And that is something that inspired me, and seeing people leave inspired me to continue pushing myself too. There were moments that like comparing was hard. Like eating disorders are already very comparative. Like you want to be, a lot of times, like when you're in your eating disorder deeply, you want to be the sickest. And I never wanted to be the sickest, but I wanted to be loved. And I felt like I wasn't being loved when I was who I was. And I think that played a big role into like getting to my worst point, to think, oh, maybe people will love me. And so when I got there and I wasn't having to be the sickest, but people still saw me and like loved me, that was when I was like, okay, I don't need to worry about comparing. I don't need to worry about who I am. I don't need to worry about struggling or not struggling. I just need to show up as me every day. And like I struggled with that the first time around when I was trying to choose recovery, very competitive. And I think that's where it was hard for me, because I never felt like it was who's trying to get better. It was always who's trying to get worse. And that's not a helpful situation at all, when we all should be wanting to get better, but we didn't have the support within each other, but also ourselves. You don't know the diagnoses of other people, but you do know they have a story and they are here for a reason, and you need to respect that. I think that was what changed the whole like home living, because it was like we all have something. We all are going through something, and we all are choosing life every day while we're here. Coping skills, at first, I was like, this is stupid. I'm not even gonna lie. I was like, these are not helping me. But they weren't helping because I wasn't using them. So obviously they're not gonna help. But I have like 3 favorite coping skills that I still use today. My first one is like redirect and reframe. So it's like any negative thought that comes into my head, I'm going to redirect it. And I might not be able to fully believe the redirection that I go into, but it can be a neutral statement. Say it's like, I don't feel like I am who I am meant to be. I can say, I don't know who I am supposed to be, but I'm becoming who I am meant to be. And that will then lead me into the gray area of being okay with like, it's okay to be whoever you are today. Tomorrow is going to be different. Yesterday was different. Today's today. And so that's like one of my favorites. I really like just like distraction, but like distraction within one another. So I don't like doing it alone. I like maybe like going out with friends, or being on FaceTime even. It's just like taking my mind off of whatever I'm thinking. And then my third one I really like is fact checking. I'm very based off the facts. Like I have to have a fact. If it doesn't line up with what I'm thinking, then let me fact check it. So I was really afraid of water. Like I thought like I was gonna drown in it if I went in it. I thought I was going to get eaten by a shark. All these things. But I had to fact check myself of knowing, okay, I'm learning how to swim, so I'm not going to drown. And there's people to save me if I'm struggling or if I'm drowning. It's like the importance of fact checking that nobody realizes. It's not just like I'm going to fact check every single second of my life, but it's fact checking that, like, the biggest one I always had to do when I was in residential was nobody is going to leave me if I'm vulnerable. So I had to always fact check that. Like, when I was vulnerable, I would have to fact check the vulnerability piece and be like, no one is leaving, no one is mad, no one is upset, everybody still sees you for who you are. So that was like the first big coping skill that has really worked for me, and it has gotten me to here today. I just feel like I gained a voice and I gained life. You know, so often you read on social media that you go into an eating disorder treatment to gain XYZ things, but they can't tell you what you're gonna receive from your treatment. They can't tell you what your healing journey is gonna be. I think it gave me this sense of, okay, it's okay to not be okay, but it's also okay to prioritize yourself and not just have to put everybody above you. I just feel like I gained so much of my life back that I lost. And it's now allowing me to return to college. It's allowing me to live every single day to the fullest and like speak truth and not fake truth. Your story isn't over when you get to the lowest point. Your story's just beginning. And I think that's something I wish I could tell my past self, of like, it's okay to not be okay, but it's that you're not failing for needing help, and you're not failing for maybe relapsing if that's where you're at. You're not failing if recovery isn't working right now. Recovery happens when you're ready for it to happen, and it might take years, it might take weeks, it might take months, but just keep going, because nobody's story is over, not one person. If one life can be saved, many other lives can be saved too. And I think that's something everybody needs to know, is that you deserve to be breathing, you deserve to be heard, and you deserve to just live. Like, I want everybody to know that, like, if they're struggling, to not hide anymore. Don't hide, because there are people who are also struggling, and if they see your vulnerability and if they see your true colors of struggling, then they're going to feel comfortable enough to also go and get help or go and speak on their struggles too. I guess ultimately, like, something that I've always been thinking about since I left EDS was to not let the struggles define your healing. So often we just put so much power into the struggle and no power into the good that comes from the struggle. It's always the negative from the struggle. And learning that the beauty is what shapes the struggles and what shapes the good. It's not just the one thing that shapes who you are. It's like, you're basically a puzzle, and puzzles can look so many different ways. So don't judge it or compare it to the other people's puzzles. Be your own puzzle, and know that, like, you're going to be put together the way you need to be if you're willing to accept that healing isn't going to just be linear. It's going to be up and it's going to be down, but ultimately, like, you deserve it, and everybody deserves to know who they are far beneath their struggles. So yeah. Thanks.